God message today. I don't know why I'm writing this, Rowan. Maybe it's because the silence between us has started to feel like a storm. Maybe it's because last night, under the wind choked skies of Bellwater, I felt your voice echo through me, though you weren't even there. Saria stood alone in her apartment, barefoot on the cold wooden floor, a note clutched in her hand that wasn't hers. It had been slipped under her door at some unknown hour, unsigned but unmistakably from the one whose name haunted her every thought, Rowan. And yet, none of this had started with letters. It started with a sentence she barely remembered speaking, maybe half a truth, maybe a whole confession wrapped in fear. But it had shattered him, not like breaking glass, but like the quiet rupture of something ancient being unearthed. They hadn't spoken since that day, but something had been set in motion, somewhere across the city, in the back room of a dim lit bookshop in the district of Elmere. Rowan sat with his head in his hands, unable to breathe without feeling her name press against his lungs. He hadn't slept in days, not out of anger, not from heartbreak, but from revelation. A slow, relentless realization that the moment she spoke to him, that single phrase, something within him split wide open, and everything ordinary turned into prophecy. You don't even know who you really are to me, she had said, almost under her breath, maybe not even meant for his ears. But he heard it, and it's all he's heard since. The rhythm of her voice had taken root in places he didn't know existed inside him. At night, the wind whispered syllables that mirrored her tone. In daylight, every passing face reminded him of what he didn't say back. She had moved on, or so it seemed. Saria had returned to her routines, her early morning coffee in Sparrow Hill Cafe, her late night strolls by the Andolin River. Yet nothing inside her had returned to stillness. A weight clung to her, like a memory still living and breathing and asking to be acknowledged. She had spoken a truth so casually, and yet it reverberated like a divine bell inside Rowan's soul. Now, every time he looked at the horizon, he felt something sacred moving just beyond the veil, something divine wrapped inside the mundane folds of life, a hidden echo of a bigger story, something neither of them fully understood, because what Saria didn't know was that Rowan wasn't ignoring the silence. He was studying it. He was replaying her words 1,000 times in his mind, dissecting them like scripture, decoding syllables like prophecy. Something had changed in him the moment she said it. He began to question everything, his beliefs, his dreams, the people he trusted, even the person he thought he was. The life he had carefully built now felt like paper in the rain, and somehow, in its place, there was her, or the possibility of her, the gravity of her. She had unknowingly unearthed something divine in him, and now even his heartbeat sounded different. At night, he stood barefoot by the window of his loft, staring at the stars, wondering if she was doing the same, if her soul was restless too, if somewhere across the sleeping city her silence was heavy with the same weight that filled his. Because this wasn't coincidence. He knew the difference now. Coincidence doesn't leave you breathless. Coincidence doesn't make your chest ache when you walk past the bench where you last saw someone. Coincidence doesn't whisper someone's name to you in your dreams with the force of thunder and tenderness combined. No, this was divine interference. And Saria, she had no idea that her voice had become the melody of someone's awakening, that what she said in passing now lived inside Rowan like a second heartbeat. What if she was the one? He had never believed in soul resonance before, But now he wondered if her presence had awakened something ancient inside him, something he hadn't accessed since age, but now he felt it, a pull, a sacred ache, not guilt, not regret, but a connection that defied logic, and yet neither of them had spoken. Pride is a quiet tyrant. Saria sat on her balcony that night, a blanket over her shoulders, wondering if her words had done more than she thought. If maybe, just maybe, they had traveled beyond sound and into spirit. If maybe the words she casually breathed had found a home in someone who needed them like oxygen. The memory of Rowan's eyes that day refused to leave her. There was something in them, a flicker, a tear not yet born, a recognition. She remembered his silence after her confession, how he stared at her, jaw tight, as if fighting something unspeakable. And then he left. She assumed she had scared him, but what she didn't see was how he stayed up that night, pacing the floor, whispering her name into the spaces between stars, how he walked to the river and back 5 times, hoping he'd bump into her, how he held his phone for hours, fingers hovering over the screen, trying to summon the courage to say something that felt too big for words. He had changed because of her, and still he said nothing. But silence has a sound, and that sound had begun to roar. Both of them, in different parts of the city, lay wide-eyed in their beds, hearing echoes of each other in the spaces where sleep should have lived. He was afraid that if he reached out now, everything would shift, and shift it would. Because the truth is, there are moments where reality rewrites itself around one sentence, one heartbeat, one person. Saria, unknowingly, had become the gravity of Rowan's transformation. And though he didn't understand it fully, he knew one thing. There is nothing ordinary about this. Not the timing, not the ache, not the way the universe kept whispering her name back to him in every quiet moment. Something divine was being whispered between their souls. Something bigger than both of them. Something neither logic nor distance could silence. And though the silence lingered, the connection screamed. Rowan finally sat down that night, lit a candle, and wrote, "If I speak now, everything might change. But if I don't, I'll never forgive myself for letting the sacred become a memory instead of a miracle." He sealed the note and walked it to her door. The night she knew. They say silence is empty, but Eliana learned it was full, full of whispers, memories, the echo of what was never said. She had cried into her pillow so many times, it no longer felt like fabric but memory itself. It held every breath she stifled, every name she never dared whisper aloud. And among them, one name pulsed louder than the rest. Micah. Micah, the one who had once looked at her like she was the miracle he'd never prayed for because he didn't believe he deserved it. He hadn't seen her since the day she walked away, not with anger, but with a soft, trembling resolve that said, "I can't keep pretending I don't feel this." And he hadn't run after her, not physically, but in every other way he had never stopped. Because the truth is, it wasn't the miles that came between them. It was fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of messing up something sacred. Fear of being seen in all his wounded truth. Micah hadn't been able to sleep since. Each night he found himself lying in the same position, on his back, staring at the ceiling, eyes wide in the darkness. Eliana's last words echoed in the corners of his room like old hymns. "Don't come looking unless you're ready to stay." He wasn't ready then, but now he couldn't bear staying away. She had seen the world in him, and he had seen a home in her. But he stayed silent. He thought he was protecting her from himself, from the wreckage of his past, from his unspoken chaos. What he didn't realize then was that love wasn't afraid of mess. Love enters the ruins and rebuilds. And so, in the quiet nights when no one watched, Micah began writing letters. Not. Meanwhile, Eliana had started speaking to God differently, not with desperation but with clarity. If he was never meant to return, let peace fill the space he left. But if he is, prepare me. And heaven listened. Because this wasn't coincidence. This wasn't poetic imagination. It was alignment. Divine timing in motion. The kind of orchestration only heaven could pen. It was no longer about wanting each other. It was about being prepared to hold what they once dropped. Micah had changed, not loudly, not publicly, but quietly in the hidden places. He began to face the man in the mirror, the one who pushed away the best thing he ever touched. He started showing up for himself first, then for the people he used to run from. Accountability became his anthem, healing became his rhythm, and Eliana, she became his lighthouse again. He began to dream of the day he'd tell her the truth, not with rehearsed words, but with trembling honesty. You weren't just someone I loved. You were the reason I wanted to become someone worth loving. And somewhere in a small chapel in Marlow Creek, Eliana knelt beside flickering candles, not asking for him, but surrendering the ache. Her prayer was simple. God, if it's your will, make it unmistakable. And the skies responded, not with thunder, but with shifts. Doors began to open in her life, doors she didn't knock on, opportunities that reminded her who she was without him. Yet in the center of it all, a thread remained, spiritual, invisible, unbreakable, because spirit doesn't lie, and love born of spirit never dies. It transforms. Eliana wasn't the same girl who wept into pillows. She had grown roots, found peace in unanswered questions. But still, there was a room in her soul where Micah's name hadn't been erased, just folded neatly and placed on a shelf with reverence. And then it happened. A message. Simple. I haven't slept since you left. She stared at it. The world didn't stop. But her breath did. He continued. I was afraid. I still am. But I'm more afraid of never telling you that loving you changed me, and I don't want to hide anymore. Tears slipped silently down her cheek. This was the moment heaven spoke of, the unveiling, the reconciliation, the return, not just of a man, but of truth. She didn't rush to reply. She didn't dance in excitement. She sat still, let the moment breathe, and whispered, Thank you, because she had become whole, and now she could receive this not from a place of desperation, but discernment. When they met again, it wasn't with fireworks. It was with eye contact that said everything words never could. Micah reached for her hand and said, Your silence taught me more than any sermon. I'm not here to beg. I'm here to build. If you let me. She smiled. Let's not go back. Let's build something new. And in that moment, the heavens rejoiced, because the waiting was never wasted. The ache was never in vain. God had been scripting a love story that didn't just survive time, it transcended it. This is not just a story, this is a prophecy fulfilled, a heartache that birthed a holy union, a silence that echoed into destiny. And now, nothing will ever be the same. Type yes if you believe in OD. Type 1111 if you believe in God.